What's up, everybody? Jensen Cummings here. Thank you for tuning in. Happy Memorial Day to everybody out there. Great show today. Different show. Great show today. Andrew Parr, good friend, as well as the founder and chief advisor of Angry Olive Consulting in Denver, Colorado. Andrew, thanks for being on the show, my friend.
Jensen, it's awesome to be here. I know we've been talking on and off for years, it seems like, on figuring out how to get a collaboration going, and it seems like we have found it.
We have absolutely found it, and I am so happy to be kind of unveiling this. There's been a lot of work happening behind the scenes, so much more work to happen. So this is going to be a little bit different of an episode for everybody. We're going to kind of interview each other back and forth, kind of pull some of the nuggets of the work that we've been going into. And so we're going to be talking to you about the Phoenix Project and the Paragon Pillars and what those really are. And we are going to have a lot more information coming about. We're going to have some different activations. We're going to have opportunities for people at every level of the industry to get involved. So we're excited to be bringing this out into the light. So with no further ado, we'll kind of get into it. And Andrew, start off, kind of lead us to begin.
Well, you mentioned the Phoenix Project and the Paragon Pillars. Why don't you dive in a little bit and talk about where these pillars came from and how they're the foundation of the project?
Yes, the Paragon Pillars. Paragon means something great at its highest level potentially. And so this idea, look, it came to me probably 5-6 years ago after a couple failed attempts at chef owner and just like really trying to understand the potential for the industry and the way that I had struggled in it, being so stuck in the way things are supposed to be within the industry. And so at that point, I organized this not as the Paragon Pillars. This is a pretty new thing as far as it being branded, because I had no idea what branding meant as just some dumb chef at the time. However, I thought about the business model and the human capital as two different things, because too often we spent our time not doing the right thing for the humans, myself included. And so it became about the business model and figuring out a way that we could get to a higher net percentage profit. When the average is at that 7 to 8%, right? It's really, really thin margins, and it forces us to do sometimes really bad things for the business, for our people, for our guests. And it puts us into this rut, into this pattern that I think diminishes the return and the opportunity for the restaurant industry. And so that was one. How do we get actually to, I put the number at 20%. And I mean, even when I said it to you, you are like, wait, yeah, but that's crazy for people when they operate. When you hit 10%, you're killing it. To double that seems completely asinine. Yet for me, it was like set a goal, an outcome, and reverse engineer where the opportunities and the challenges are. So that was one. And the second was, we just churn through people so fast. When I reflected back at a moment on how many employees that I had had over the years, it was over 1,000. It was over 1,000 people in, a 6, 7, 8 year span. And it's like, it's too many people. We just chum ourselves up. And so I thought, how can we get to a number of 75% employee retention? And that number seems completely crazy. And these two things were born out of this. It turned into kind of this dream. I think I had the idea, and then I kind of started to think about the way that it could manifest. And one of the things that was fascinating to me was thinking about retirement in our industry is non-existent. There is you don't retire coming out of a restaurant, right?
Right.
You think about it. And so for me, I thought, what if you could have the norm become that a 65-year-old line cook could be retiring, a 65-year-old server, bartender could be retiring, and you do see that a little bit more. But in the kitchen, you really almost never see it. But a 65-year-old line cook retiring, having put in 40 years in that position in our industry, have built so much infrastructure, so much equity, so much balance that they get the gold watch and the pension, that classic idyllic American dream. And that's what that was really born out of. So I thought about that and all the different levers that you need to pull, all the different areas that is going to take to actually be able to even have a chance to accomplish. So that's where that really came from. And then when you and I started talking about it, it was just, again, I'm going to throw this crazy idea out there, Andrew. And at first, I think you're like, yeah, it is crazy. However, I think that there's a lot of opportunity. And that really sparked us to have a conversation. And then you really dubbed it the Phoenix Project. Very much felt like very apropos for the moment, for sure. So when you started to think about my idea and these crazy notions and organizing, because that's what you're really, really good at, the Phoenix Project, how did that become the way to catalyze that? And then talk about some of the structure of the Phoenix Project, kind of from your point of view.
Sure. And before I dig into that, real quick, I want to say thank you to a good friend of mine, Jabriel Donahue. Jensen, you had a lot of this stuff packed away and you've been thinking about it and building on it for a while. And Jabriel is doing some really good work in Seattle out in Washington State. And he had asked me to weigh in on a project that he's working on. And so that was the spark for me to come and talk to you and start
That's
some
right.
things off of each other. And so he really lit the match. So thank you, Jabriel. And I think to circle back to what you were asking, there are a number of components that we need to look at. One is we really want to build a coalition to bring all of this together. And that coalition is multi-tiered and multi-layered, and it includes people in the restaurant itself, whether it be the line cooks, the servers, the bartenders, the dishwashers that you talked about, the owners, the operators, the management level people that are getting it done day to day and doing all of the grinding. But also we need to look at the entire ecosystem or food chain of what's going on, because so many people outside of the direct purview of the industry have such a significant impact on how we're able to operate. And some of those people are, the government, landlords, property owners, people who we would typically consider to be vendors, mainliners, broadliners, specialty foods, beverage distillers, makers, brewers, all of those people, folks that attorneys, CPAs, insurance, so many different things are involved and so many different people to help bring these businesses to life and make them sustainable. And so we really want to switch the paradigm and start thinking about all of these people up and down the chain instead of as vendors, truly as partners. And, that term has been thrown around a lot, but the reality of a true partnership is that both businesses are working to sustain each other, right? So it's not like the old, well, he's my vendor or she's my vendor and they work for me and I need to squeeze everything. And, when we talk about property owners and landlords, back in the day when somebody was building a mall or a development or a block or a complex,
Yeah.
the Macy's and the Nordstroms of the world got, anchor store status. And a lot of times it was decreased rent, additional advertising promotion, the top line, the top spot on the signage outside. And the reason was because they were the ones that the property owner was depending upon to bring everybody to feed everyone else in that development. And the reality is that right now, restaurants are those anchors, whether you're looking at a community, a block, a development, a neighborhood, and that partnership, and this is a very specific example of what one of those might look like, but turning restaurants into those anchors of those developments and helping to understand that people are coalescing around those restaurants. So it might be easier to sustain your boutique jewelry store or whatever it might be that's in that same development because the anchor is being promoted and people are coalescing around that.
Love it. And here's an interesting thing when I'm hearing you talk about that. When it comes to partnerships, and I mentioned kind of all the different levers that you need to pull, because we too often are focusing kind of very narrowly on the thing that seems like it's on fire at the moment. We're very much reactionary. We're very much tacticians versus strategists in restaurants quite often. And so partnerships versus vendors, maybe even a little bit more on the way that that relationship is formed, because no longer are you like just buying a product or a service, but you're trying to figure out how the product and service fits into the whole scope of your business. And then I know we definitely want to touch on how that actually fits into budgets and P&Ls, but start with like the relationship within that, why that is so important.
Well, I think it's so important, as I started to touch on, in terms of having your partners invested in each other, right? And it kind of ties back to what you were talking about as far as pulling the levers back and forth, right? And so it's, you know, one of the things that I look at is acquisition cost, right? So if you are a broadliner and you're looking at pricing, what would happen if you could reduce pricing, whatever percentage it is, whether it's an eighth of a percentage, a quarter of a percent, 2%, depending upon the product or the line item? What if you could stretch that far, just a little bit harder, and know that you wouldn't have to sink millions of dollars into acquisition costs for new clients who are only going to have a livelihood of 3 months or 6 months, and then you have to start that cycle all over again? Whereas if you really move from that vendor proposition to the partner proposition, it's like, it's really a whole lot more about, I can get you this pricing on these products for this amount of time, but we're already 3 to 6 months ahead of that. And I know that when this time period happens, then we're going to have to raise the price on this, but we can drop the price on this, and really help keep that P&L in line relative to not just saying, oh, well, my dairy is what my dairy is, and I need these products.
Yeah, I think it goes both ways too. I think, the vendor is trying to squeeze every bit of margin out of the restaurant. The restaurant is trying to do the same the other way, and it becomes this antagonist relationship quite too often. And that's not holistically the case, but quite often that happens. Or on the restaurant side, I've been guilty of this, just thinking that the vendors work for me. Like, I just buy shit from you.
Right.
Like, you just an order taker. You guys just supply the products, and that's where the relationship really ends. And so it's a lot of times like, I need this, go find it for me, versus what's happening in the market. How can we be smart? How can we move around? How do we understand how to create fluidity and flexibility in the way that we do business as a matter of fact? So I really like that. All the levers, P&L. Talk about how when you and I started going through this process, right, there's a shitload of people that are involved in a restaurant. The ecosystem, as we talk about a lot, is massive. When we started saying, well, who's the person that's responsible for this and the next thing and the next thing, we're over 50 different line items that we're looking to manage just in trying to build a coalition. So talk about the P&L and just give us an idea of the scope and the breadth of that.
Yeah, I think it's pretty significant, and it's another major change in perspective or point of view. And when we started talking about the P&L, um, especially in terms of helping owner operator, anyone who gets tied into the P&L and budgeting, really understand where we were coming from, this is a major piece where you can actually visualize. And what we talked about was throwing the typical format of the P&L statement out the window and really organizing things from that reimagined, instead of who, what, where, when, why, and how, from the reimagined why, who, what, how, when, where, right? It'll take a little practice to get that to roll off the tongue.
Yes.
But I think that, if we reimagine the P&L and the way that it's laid out, and we look at the why, right? So if the why is the beginning of everything, and it should be, the question, why are you opening this restaurant? That's where everything starts. What is the impact that you want to have? Who is going to be the beneficiary of all of this impact? It's not just, oh, I just want to sell beer, so I'm just gonna pop up a tap house, or I've got a great burger recipe and I can compete with all of the other hundreds of burger places
Yeah.
in Denver. It's more about looking at the community that you want to go into and the people that you want to serve, and understanding why you are different and why you are able to provide that level of service. And, we're not talking about tableside service. We're talking about providing a true service for the community that you're in. And so everything that relates to why goes to the top of the P&L. Revenue is obviously a big part of that why, because it drives everything else. The branding, marketing, all of those pieces that become part of the why fall under that part of the P&L. The who, so you've got all of your labor, but then all of the benefits that you can potentially offer, and everything that gets tied into that, the what, the food, the beverage, all of your programming. And so, without getting into micro work here,
Sure. Yeah.
we just want to give that overview of saying, stop looking at the P&L the same way that we always have, and really be open to looking at it from a new top down, where why and who are the first two parts of the P&L that you look at, because why and who are the first two parts of the business that we should be looking at.
I love it, man. I absolutely love it. I think it's an important way, the process that we've been going through, and I think reimagining that. And yeah, I've been practicing my why, who, what, how, where, when. We're gonna get that down because it's a paradigm shift, really, to your point. So, okay, I really like all that. Then for us, it kind of got into, for me, what's important is exactly that. So the whole premise of this show is to value and focus on why and who before what and how. And it's very like Nietzsche meets Simon Sinek. We love Simon Sinek. We talk about the finite and infinite game a lot. Also, I'm always like, for me personally, channeling Danny Meyer meets Anthony Bourdain. It's a lot of different contradictions, and I think we can hold that space in this industry. It's very important. And so we get so chummed up in the minutia of what we do and how we do it, right? Thinking that that's our competitive advantage, that's what gives us our competitive set. It differentiates us over our competition. I really believe why we do what we do, why we get out of bed in the morning to do what we do, who it is we serve, who's in the trenches, who's gotten us to the point, like that's the things that I think people actually give a shit about. That's what people care about, internally and externally, right? Those internal and external guests.
Right.
Jeff Parr, very important. I will never forget it, and I've forgotten it quite a few times in my career. Every time I've been successful, it's because I recognize that I work for people. I need to form partnerships. And every time I haven't, I take people for granted, vendors and internal guests, your team members. So I think it's important. And so we talk about unsung hospitality heroes, hashtag unsung hospitality heroes, the people. It's the people. It's always the people. And that includes guests, ones that right now in this moment are coming to your restaurant to pick up curbside like we just did yesterday at Il Posto. That relationship really matters. And, dropping a 25, 35, 50% tip, because we know how much the humans inside those four walls are struggling right now. And so we're working on the business model and talking about the business model, which its job is to empower its people more than anything. I really, truly believe that. And so that's where the 75% employee retention and satisfaction really came into play. I wanted to rethink the way that we thought about our P&L, and having you organize that, amazing. I also want to rethink the way that we thought about our human capital. And so that's where the 75% employee retention, when the current state of things, Jeff, and we talk about this a lot. Excuse me, Andrew. Now I got Jeff on my mind. Andrew.
I'll take it. It's an honor.
Amazing. 56 days. 56 days was the average tenure of a restaurant employee. Restaurants are turning over 100% quite often. We know new restaurants, a lot of times you'll turn over 150% within your first 18 months if you survive. That is where the investment needs to be made more than anywhere, in my opinion. And we kind of have organized that by wage, livable wage, for the love of God. Absolutely. And that doesn't mean is it $15 minimum wage, is this or that, livable wage, whatever that means. And that needs to be an important part of the conversation. Benefits. Health insurance is playing out more than ever in this moment as so important to taking care of your people, your community. And then you get into culture and education, ways that you can really develop your people in a meaningful way, that you can create culture. Because a lot of times you'll find that if given the option of an investment of, say, your restaurant does $1 million a year and you want to invest $5,000 every quarter additional into your people, and you give them the choice, say, would you like to further kind of culture and the way that we develop as a team and staff events and things like that, or education? Do you want to get your certified cicerone or sommelier or a butchery class, or do you want a 35 cent to $1.50 raise? A lot of times your team will say, we want the education because we have our livable wage, we have our base benefits, we feel good. So want to lay that out for people. Very important in the model is the way that we invest in our people creates the opportunity for an industry built on being equitable, profitable, and sustainable. And I think that is really the key. So in that comes some mindset shifting, paradigm shifting. You and I talk a lot about some of the terminology used within that. So get into that a little bit, especially the dynamic of investment versus expense, and then the cut control versus kind of grow and develop mentality. Maybe dig into that a little bit.
Yeah, and I think the language is important because like you talked about, changing your mindset is going to involve changing your language. And this is not something that is born out of the virus. This is something that is born out of the need to change the way we're running restaurants. And it's existed for a long time. And like a lot of things that the virus has accelerated a timeline on, I think that it has really brought to the forefront, as we've discussed, the need to it's not about tweaking the way that we run the restaurant, it's talking about wholesale top to bottom changes. And like you said, that language, going from cut and control to growth and development. And the reality is that we can look at a lot of different scenarios, a lot of different line items within that P&L, right? Like, somebody can say, okay, how much farther can you get your labor down? Well, ultimately the answer is I can get my labor down to zero, because if I cut it low enough, the service is going to be at such a terrible level, the quality is going to be at such a terrible level, nobody will come in anymore, and we can just shut the restaurant. So there you go. I've just hit 0% labor for you. And the the point of view is that we know that there's a floor below which labor cannot drop, and also there's a ceiling, right? Like, there are a certain number of bodies that you can't go beyond, no matter how much higher your sales go. But in terms of looking at growth and development instead of cut and control, there's also I don't want to call it a formula, but there's definitely a thought process by which you can strategically add people to your team, whether it's the front of the house, the back of the house. And by incrementally adding those people, you are growing and developing the top line of the business rather than focusing so much on cutting and controlling to get that number to the bottom line where you want it to be. And one of the ways that we look at that too is, other than revenue, most people just look at every single line item on the P&L and say, well, that's an expense, that's an expense, that's an expense. And the reality is that these are all investments that need to be made into the business. And going again back to the pulling the levers model, we need to look at it from the point of view of, where am I going to make the investment? How much am I going to invest? And where do I ratchet down one investment so that I can ratchet up another one that will bubble up to that top line and create the highest level of flow and efficiency? And this is just a model that needs to be the levers get moved up and down on a daily, weekly, monthly, quarterly, annual basis. And it's not just a set it and forget it solution. It's really an active involvement in the understanding of your business and how it operates.
Yeah, and to that point, this here's the other thing that I want to make sure people understand. I'm not telling you how to run your business. I would never do that. I have no place to do that. I've failed at that multiple times. The goal really is to give a roadmap, an opportunity for us to coalesce, to create coalitions, to be able to understand that there is a lot of different ways that you can skin the cat. And we are so ingrained and it's so embedded in us the way things are supposed to be that it becomes really hard and rigid. And we push back a lot of times against potentially the wrong things, which a lot of times is cut and control mentality. The way that we manage variable control costs, prime costs, and so often tie bonuses to these things. And we have junior entry level sous chef, I didn't know any better, bar manager saying, you need to control labor costs. You need to be at 9%. You need to be at 12%. These numbers are arbitrary numbers based on a system that's completely flawed, and you just keep feeding that monster. And so that's something that we talk about a lot is imagine if you started investing in those people and created less turnover. The number one cost that a restaurant has is really based on that. Imagine if you think about these very linear, very rigid thinking of, you talked about landlords and rent. Rent is 10% of your gross revenue. That's the average model. What if that was 7.1%? What would that look like? How would you get buy-in from the landlord because they know now you are the anchor tenant. You are the flagship of the Rhino neighborhood or the OTR or the gas lamp or wherever you are in the country. You are now the draw. And you are creating an opportunity for the yoga studio, for the boutique shoe shop, for the whatever it is. You're creating butts and seats because you're creating that foot traffic and that attention. And so now you have the leverage significantly more than you believe. And if you get down to 7.2%, and instead of having your labor costs be 9 and 12%, you're at 11 and 15%, all of a sudden your net profit allows you an opportunity for growth and investment, yet you're not cutting and controlling your most valuable assets, which is your people. And that is really what we're getting to the core of. And so kind of to recap for everybody, the Phoenix Project is a coalition, and I'll let Andrew talk a little bit more about exactly how that coalition is coming together and what we're going to practically do with this information. We are trying to figure out a way to create a more equitable, profitable, and sustainable business model for restaurants in perpetuity to be able to have everyone make evolved and personal decisions. This isn't, it has to be X, Y, and Z. You have to understand where you can pull those levers, where you can shift and cut 0.2%, an eighth of a percent, 7.2% down from 10% to invest in the things that actually matter, the why and the who, then your what, how, where, and when. That is the order of operations that we're trying to bake in to this idea. That's the goal of the Phoenix Project, built upon the Paragon Pillars of 20% net profit for independent owned, single unit, 3 unit, like very small operations, because that is a lot of times the norms of we have 100 locations, we drop 21.2% to the bottom line. We're talking about the small independent restaurants. We're talking about the small startup 3 unit type places, and 75% employee retention and satisfaction at flow state year on year on average. And you're always going to have that 25% of transient. Yet we're going to show people that this is a real job. We are investing in you. This is not a stop off to the next thing where they actually invest in you. And that's what your college degree is for. We are that industry for you. That's what the kind of the recap is. And so how to get involved. What practically are we doing kind of in this moment to develop this? We talked about a coalition. What the hell is a coalition? How does that actually manifest? And what are some of the other steps? How can people get involved?
So the coalition, as we touched on, is basically everybody inside the industry, broken down by job title. Every individual position has their own unique needs that need to be served, as well as everyone who is a partner to the restaurant business. And so what we are in the process of doing right now is putting together some survey work that everyone can participate in. And the surveys are going to be targeted based on who you are and what you contribute to this ecosystem. So if you're a property owner, your survey is going to be different than if you are a commercial realtor or an insurance broker. And if you are a dishwasher, your survey is going to be specific to you and different than if you are a host. And so we're in the process of putting that together right now. And if you want to participate in the survey process, if you have something to contribute to the Phoenix Project, if you want to have a better understanding, if you want to contribute in whatever way, you can drop Jensen a note at jensen@bestservedcreative.com. And you can also feel free to drop me a note at andrew@angryoliveconsulting.com. And we are super excited to grow this coalition and have everybody be able to be an impact on in what we're doing.
Yeah, I think it's very interesting because every single facet of the industry, there is a different need. There's a different motivation that is going to compel them to be involved, to invest themselves, their money, their time, their effort, any part of that. And so that's a big part of what we want. So anybody kind of on the front end listening to this, these early moments for us, definitely reach out to us and give your feedback on what you need. Because right now we're formulating what those questions on the survey that bring the most value potential to anybody across those segments. And then we're also reaching out to kind of some of the industry leaders that we know, some people that we are seeing and hearing and talking to that are out there pushing the boundaries, that are out there saying we're trying to do things a little bit differently and trying to support their efforts as well. And those will manifest in a couple ways. We want to be able to take this to legislature. I think we want to have this coalition say, look, all of these different entities across the ecosystem of food and beverage and hospitality need support. We are looking to move and shift this industry. We see the immense value and economic impact that this industry has and the potential that if 15.6 million people, 660,000 restaurants in this country go under, shit is hitting the fan, and our communities, our legislatures are going to feel a massive impact from that. And so we do have an opportunity to coalesce and use that leverage and not just lobby. We're not here to lobby. We're here to say, here is the solution rather than give me this thing that I demand from you. And it's a different mindset that we're going after. And so these are kind of the important things that we are trying to coalesce and present and represent for this industry, which means it includes everybody. We don't have one way we're trying to go about this. We have goals. We have goalposts that we're trying to kick this thing through. And that means it's going to come in a lot of different forms, and people's personal needs in that moment are going to be a big part of that. And across the country, we're focused right now on Colorado because that's kind of our community. And we hope that we can create a roadmap then for people across the country at different facets of the industry that have different economic structure and barriers to be a part of that. So awesome. This felt really good, Andrew, to be able to talk to people about this. I think a lot more is going to be coming, and we just wanted to share this with people, and it's going to be developing. And I know that 10 people, 20 people are going to reach out to each of us, and all of a sudden they're going to shift our mindset, and we're going to tweak it a little bit more, and the outcome and the goal and the process is going to become even better because it truly serves who and why and who. Look out tomorrow as well at 2 p.m. Mountain Time. A panel is coming out that includes, well, the panel is called Creatively Investing in People. It felt like one of the first places we want to find out how currently there is being some investment made across the industry. And so look out for that. The panel includes Brother Luck from down in Colorado Springs, Carolyn Glover, who's got Annette out in Aurora, Josh Nurnberg, Grand Junction with Bin 707, Juan Padro with, I can't even count how many restaurants he's got with Creative Culinary, him and Katie O'Shea and Max McKissick and their whole team. Yumi Tran, amazing powerhouse, who people probably don't know who that is. after you see this episode, you're going to be super excited about her. Anders Benson from the Denver Chefs Guild, Kevin Galaba, who's with Friends and Family, and Rebecca Berry, who's with Hot Schedules. I think that's everyone. That's everybody. That's going to be a part of that panel. So check that out, because it's going to be another layer of kind of the things that we're working on and focusing on investing in people and giving some opportunities for that conversation to happen. So Andrew Parr, this is good. We have been doing a lot of work on the back end. We have so much more work to do. I love also how this energy that we have for this openness that we have, this drive that we have is involving other people. I think of Mario Nasafero already is going to get involved. He's with Bird's Eye Hospitality and has a great mind for surveys and kind of crunching that data. Tina Betts from Human Design, Kimberly Archer from Windstream. All of a sudden, you put good out there, Andrew, and people start to reach out to you, say, I want to be involved. Here's something that I could bring to the table. That's literally what this whole model is built on, that everybody needs to have a seat at the table. So thank you for working with me on it. Thank you for sharing this. I really, really appreciate it.
Absolutely. And I think, we had this conversation very early on. There's just too much to do and it's too important. So moving forward is the only way. And I appreciate being able to be on today and share with everybody and take one of our behind the scenes chats and make it live for everybody to see.
Oh, it's great. I appreciate it. All right, Andrew, we got a lot of work to do. And by the way, your background is amazing. I kind of feel like I need a new background now. Look at all your little figurines there. It's legit, man. I like it.
Absolutely. Thank you.
All right. Have a great day. I'll talk soon.
All right.
All right. Paragon Pillars, Phoenix Project. You can see my energy is through the fucking roof. It's really important work. And so many countless people are going to be involved with this. This isn't my project. This isn't even my idea. It's already gone exponentially further than I could have imagined in my scribblings years ago, just in a couple conversations with Andrew, and then developing that, and then involving more people. I just want to be able to create a space and continue to hustle and communicate for you, for us, so that we have an opportunity to create, again, a business model and an industry that is equitable, profitable, and sustainable. We need it. We deserve it. We really deserve it. The hospitality that this industry and the humans within the hospitality, the unsung hospitality heroes, are showing right now is fucking legendary. I have never been so inspired by people in my entire life, to see people who can't navigate unemployment and are so in turmoil right now, to turn around and text me and say, I want to find a place to volunteer, chef. Where do you know that I can go and help feed people this weekend? It's unbelievable. Believe it. That's what's worth fighting for. That's who is worth fighting for. That's why I will continue to do this show, continue to work behind the scenes to try and empower and uplift the humans in hospitality. That's it. That's what I'm doing. Need you guys' help. Reach out to us, connect, and look out for more in the next weeks. Tomorrow, 2 p.m. on Best Served Podcast, Angry Olive Consulting, the Denver Chefs Guild. You'll see the panel, which will be about a 45-minute long panel that discusses exactly this: creatively investing in people to get to that 75% net profit. 75% employee retention satisfaction. We can do it.